Welcome back to On the Horizon podcast, hosted by Jessie Sage and Melrose Michaels. First, thank you so much for becoming a premium subscriber and supporting our podcast. This is getting you extra exclusive, unheard, and unseen footage from each interview that we have on the horizon.
Steph Sia is a stripper, content creator, and pole dance instructor based in Vancouver, Canada. She is the host of the sex work podcast, Stripped by Sia, that shares the stories of the lived experiences of sex workers with the aim to destigmatize the sex industry.
One of the things that I've found is that, especially when I first started working like this, that I was like saying yes to like every single thing and thinking like, yes, I don't know what's going to come next. So I have to say yes to everything that comes in. And what I found, like the further along in my career I get, is that like there's more payoff often in like starting to say no to things and then putting more of your energy into the things that are working. But it like takes some time to get to that point. And I was wondering like what you found about not just like doing everything, but like maybe sometimes not doing things like.
Gosh, yes, I could definitely speak to this for sure. It took me a long time to get to that point because like I was taught to just say yes to every opportunity because money and success and all that stuff that comes with it. But then if you're accepting everything that you're not fully 100% behind, that's actually doing, I would say, more damage to your business. You know, because you're outputting all this energy in like multiple spaces, and some of them are not going to be the right fit, or maybe are a lot of freaking work. I can give you an example of this. So I was subcontracting for a former client of mine. Last year, they hired me as an independent contractor, and they're like, your work's so great, let's hire you full time. And then they laid me off, and then we went back into this contracting kind of like flow, which was kind of fine. But then I had so many red flags going back into that discussion. But for me, I was like, well, this is like easy money. And this is like really, really, really easy work that I'm doing for them. I could just like get a few like $1,000 here and there and it should be fine. That should be good. But they turned out to be one of the worst clients I've ever had in my life. Just like expecting me to be on call all the time. This is one of my vanilla clients. And like just expecting me to be on call all the time. I had specific days, again, like me back to organizing. I had specific days that I'd be working on the projects with this particular client and specific hours of operation that I'm available to them. But they just expected everything to be like done right away and like all this stuff. And like, I just felt like I was getting so stressed out and like my anxiety was just like through the roof with them whenever I got an email landing in my inbox. So I just decided to cut them off earlier this year because I was like, this is not serving me anymore. And my rates for 2022 are this. Out of good faith, I had honored my 2021 rates. And if you don't want to pay my 2022 rates, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to sever this agreement. So that's what we did, and I feel great.
I feel good about it. I've just learned that lesson a little bit too. And me and Jessie had this conversation. I'm like, I feel like I'm being pulled in a lot of directions and I'm not doing anything well enough. And like, that's a lot of cause for my anxiety personally, because I want to achieve at the level of production that I intend to put out. Like, I'm passionate about the things I'm doing, and also they impact my community. So like, I feel that obligation and like responsibility to do them well. So like, if I can't do that, like I need to cut ties and like limit where my resources are going, especially like my own mental and emotional capital, because it's so important.
It is. I found like that it was hard for me to figure out like how to do that, because individually every single thing I was doing felt worthwhile to me.
Yeah, same.
And I was like, oh, but there's a good reason that I'm doing this. Oh, well, there's also a good reason I'm doing this. And then there's a good reason I'm doing this. But then I was like, that all makes sense individually, but as a whole, like this is not feasible. I can't do this. And so I'd have to be like, okay, I need to figure out how to take a step back and be like, yes, individually, all this stuff is awesome. Together, it's nightmare. So like, I got to figure out how to reorganize and like reorient in a way that's actually sustainable.
Yeah, but it also might come down to timing as well. So if it's good for you, then maybe you might have to take a step back for a month. If you're allowed to do that and you have the capacity to do that, then revisit it at a later time date. Like that might be an option for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of what I did. I was like, I'm going to shelf this project and let it like kind of lie, make it as inexpensive to sit there and pend for a while and then circle back to it when I can do it right, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but those are like decisions that you have to make as somebody who, as independent contractors, which all of us are independent contractors and small businesses, like we're our own small businesses. So we have to figure out like how to make all of that work.
Yeah. Totally. You don't get to turn it off often at the end of the day. So
no, I think it's really important to also, sorry if I could say one more thing. It's also important to be self-aware in terms of like what your capacity levels are and how much, like if you're reaching like the top of your jar or whatever, then you have to say no, and you have to be comfortable saying no as well. And that doesn't come overnight. Like usually I'm like ruminating things for a bit, and then I'm like, okay, I can't, I cannot take this on anymore. I'm going to have to take a step back. So
yeah,
absolutely. I think that's a good place to wrap up.
Yeah. Yeah.
A good tone to end on, because I think so many of the people listening are probably or have dealt with that. And also like, I've been telling people lately, I'm like, I'm in a season of saying no. Like I'm eliminating things at this point. But opportunity so good comes along in this season, like see me next season.
That's perfect.
Yeah. Awesome. Shy Spells joined the sex work community in 2017. Her expertise lies in phone and camera work, and she's met so many amazing people from this line of work, which has helped her grow and blossom. Although she may not be as active as she once was, she's grateful for everything she's learned. If she's not taking calls or chatting with her fans, she's in the kitchen whipping up some floral jellies.
I like this conversation because I think it's important to talk about like what it's like to live in a world in which like you don't have a paycheck and you're just like hustling. Like this is a hustle. I
think too, that one thing we didn't really touch on, or I guess a little bit, but from the gig economy that I think translates no matter what the gig is just the resilience. Like it will teach you hands down, because like you have a bad month, a bad week, whatever, but you have to keep going. Like what other option is there? You either leave the space and get a 9 to 5, or you keep going and you figure out how can I improve this, you know? So the resiliency, that stands out to me.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Just like, so I feel like although people are getting more like into like the gig economy, as you know, a lot of people are doing, you know, Lyft and selling things and making things and stuff. I feel like as big as OnlyFans has gotten and people coming out like, yeah, I do sex work, I feel like there's still a lot of stigma, especially around feminine presenting people, AFAT people who do sex work. And even though it's a gig and it falls into that category, I still feel like even with how big, I feel like a lot of people, you know, with the OnlyFans and joining as soon as they turned 18 and all that stuff, when it became so widespread and all these people are doing it, I still feel like we get judged for it. And it's like, you know, we talk about the hustle and how hard it is and how hard we work for it. And I feel like for everyone else, it's like, yeah, they're hustling, they're making ends meet, they're doing what they need to do to pay the bills. But I still feel like when we do it, it's supposed to be shameful. We're not supposed to be proud of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
I was in my head. That's something that came up, and it's a little off topic, so I was going to wait and pause to see if you wanted to add before I derailed it a little. But because I feel like when I hear in conversations in passing that someone refers to someone else like, oh, they drive Uber on the weekends or they do Lyft on the weekends, I feel like there's a little bit of shame and stigma attached to that too. Like, oh, they're not good enough at what they're doing, so they have to do that too. Or like, when I hear that, my first thought is like, good for them, they're hustling, you know?
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem to be the collective perspective on it most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like really complicated. I think the whole thing is really complicated. I do agree with you, Shy, that like there is an added like shame and stigma to like sex work when we're like doing what we need to do. And I feel like I don't know how that changes. Like, I think that it has like, it's been around for so long. I feel like it is good. The only thing I can say is that I feel like with younger people, it's like much, much better. So
yes.
like, and so I think maybe that's where we change. Like, we're not going to change the boomers' mind about like being in porn, but like the Gen Zers, the Zoomers, they have a very different perspective on that. And I think it's because a lot of like, it's so much more familiar to them now. Like, it was interesting. I'm driving. So I have, well, one's an adult now, but I have a teenager, and I'm driving around with my teenager one day. And I think I've told this story.
I love this story.
And he's like, oh, my friend lives in that house. And I'm like, cool. And then he's like, oh, and his mom's an OnlyFans model. And I was like, how do you know that? And he's like, I don't know. We just know what moms are OnlyFans moms. And I was like, oh, okay. But it wasn't because I don't even think he thought it was salacious. I think he was telling me, because even though I don't say this explicitly, like I think he knows at one point I had like an OnlyFans, you know? And, I think he was just like, oh, by the way, my friend lives in that house and his mom is an OnlyFans model. And I was like, okay, cool. And like in PJ's teaching, like I'm not teaching anymore, but PJ's still teaching. And they say that like 5 years ago, especially when they would start to talk about sex work, they would have to tell their students like a lot of background information. And right now, the students that are coming in because of OnlyFans and because of like the proliferation of this, he's not explaining to them
that's interesting
what OnlyFans is.
That's really awesome. I think you're right. I have a younger sibling, and I have two siblings. They're both younger. One's older than one's my generation, the other one's Gen Z. And so the one that's a millennial, they hate the idea. When they found out what I do, they were very upset with me. But the younger one, they were just like, oh, okay. Like, that's what you do. Cool. Like, cool beans, whatever pays the bills.
Right.
Like, they're like, it's fine as long as you still take me to Hot Topic.
I know. That's kind of how it was with my kids too. I remember when we like came out to them, we were at dinner, and I really got the impression that they were like, is this what this meeting is about? You know, like they don't care how I'm paying for their meal. They just like want me to pay for their dinner, you know? And I think that, it does feel like there's a shift, but I do not think that the shift is starting with the older generations. I feel like it's going to have to.
I think that's how most change is made, really. It's really hard to persuade someone that their life experience is not aligned with the present social climate. Like, I think that's a hard sell.
And I think that that's important to bring up too, because I feel like I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm a little bit older, but like millennials and like the economy and the job market like is not the same. Like, and people are graduating from college with like no job options. Like things are very, very in a lot of debt. Things are very, very different. And I feel like the labor precarity that like the younger generations are entering into like has to impact the way that they're thinking about things like sex work, because so many people that they know are working in these spaces.
Yeah. And it has to be closer to the reality. Yeah. Their life experience is like, well, I did the things you said I was supposed to do, and now I have no job. So now what do I do? And like, these are the options, because that's what the market has done.
Whereas I don't think for our parents, or even like, you know, my sisters that are closer to my age too, like it just doesn't, like doing marginalized work or not like, just following a straight and narrow path, like doesn't make as much sense.
We also have to factor, I guess, into the equation also the internet. Like our generation above was not coming up with this tool the way that we have all these things so accessible to us. So like the idea of getting naked on the internet to them might mean something different than it does to us. It doesn't mean it's as accessible the way it really is. And these are all things I think to consider, where, you know, the younger generation, they don't know a world without the internet. So this makes perfect sense. It's different. Social media. Yeah. That's a very cool topic. I like that. I like that question.
Yeah. Do you, what kind of advice do you think that you would give to, like, speaking of younger people, to like younger people who are considering starting OnlyFans or working in our industry, like as a side hustle and not as their, you know, not people who want to be career sex workers, but side hustlers? What would you say to them?
Well, of course, the number, what's on the internet stays on the internet. That's definitely something to think about. That's something I thought about for a long while before I pressed that record button. But as someone who did that and now works in a vanilla job where my job knows and they don't judge me for it. Luckily, I know that's not the case with everyone, but I guess my biggest advice would be to, do your research and think in the long term. Don't think, right now. I understand a lot of people, especially with everything with COVID and everything, everybody is like, how am I going to get my bills paid today? Yeah. And so a lot of times a gig money is quick money. And so I understand you want to pay the bills today, but also, think about it in the long term. But also keep in mind that it's not shameful in any regard. So even if you go somewhere and they find out you did OnlyFans or something and they go, oh, well, we can't have you here because that's a bad influence or whatever. Screw them. Like you don't want to work for a company. Like you don't want to be with a company like that. There's, bigger and better things going on for you. There's nothing immoral about doing sex work. It's we all know it's the oldest profession. The demand is there. That's the thing. A lot of people who be like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. That they're the same ones buying the subscriptions. Yeah. So, don't I say don't feel shame with it. That was my biggest thing. I felt a lot of shame when I first started. And now, when people bring it, they're like, oh my God, you did that? And I'm like, yeah. And I loved it and I don't regret it. Yeah. And it helped me become who I am. I just turned 30 and I feel so much more content with myself. I dress the way I want to, do the things I want, and I care less about what people think of me. And that's helped me that's helped me so much more. So I don't regret that at all. And,
I feel like that kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier when you were talking about communication or people getting upset and realizing that that's not about you. I think you can translate that to this discussion too, into shame, because I've had a lot of people put their shame on me because of my work. That's not about me. Yeah. And when I can step back and be like, I know you have some issues, but those issues aren't mine and I can't take them on. That's something you have to do.
I have a really short story yesterday. I was at work yesterday and somebody called me the before picture for Jenny Craig. And they were just upset, and that's what they said to me. And it was so funny because when they said it, I just looked at them and I was just like, oh, okay. And I didn't feel, and I'm like, if this was 5 years ago, I would have dropped to the floor and cried. Yeah. And it was so nice to be able to sit there and be like, oh, okay, well, I'm sorry you're going through what you're going through today. I would still love to help you. But, I'm not going to let that affect me. It's like, okay, you pointed out that I'm fat. Congratulations. Yeah.
It's good to know you guys.
Yeah. It's interesting too to I feel like one of the things that sex work has done for me is to teach me to not take on other people's shame that. They have an issue. I recently had somebody on Twitter who got upset with me because I called myself fat and was like, you're not fat. You're blah, blah, blah. And I think you're really hot. And I was like, okay, but what does that have to do with anything? And I was thinking through it and I was like, oh, but that's his shame. That has nothing to do with me. I'm not taking that on. And then I recently posted something about somebody stopping me on the street and was like, you're really beautiful. You should be a full figure model, which I thought was cute because I do model, but I'm not going to tell that person that. So I was like, okay. And then this guy was like, why did he have to say that you're full figured? I mean, you are, but she could just say model. And I was like, what? Why do you care about this? You're associating a whole bunch of bad things with being full figure that I'm not associating with that. So I'm not taking that on. That's not a fight that I want to fight. And that's a nice space to be in,
to operate from.
It really is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sex work really helped me get comfortable with the word fat. Now I exclusively use it when I describe my body. I don't tell people, I'm curvy or I'm more to love or anything like that. I'm just like, no, I'm fat and it's not a negative thing and I'm okay with that. And
Yeah, I really like that.
We hope you enjoyed this bonus footage from this episode of On the Horizon, and we look forward to having you tune in next time.